G'day legends. In this video, I'm going to show you how to mix a really great kick sound that's going to work well in metal, hardcore, and hard rock genres. So these are the drums that we're working on. So massive difference in sound, and we're going to focus on the kick sound for this particular video. But if you would like to see a full mix breakdown for this drum mix, then please drop a comment below. Let me know if you're keen for that, because if enough of you are interested in it, then I'll do a full breakdown on this drum mix. So let's dive into the kick. So just quickly, let me show you the processed kick and then the unprocessed kick. So you can hear the processed kicks a lot more polished sounding, a lot more even, like between the lows and the highs. The raw kick sounds a little bit muffled, a bit darker. There's nothing wrong with that, but for the genre that we're chasing, we need that like larger than life, a little bit plasticky sounding on the top end of the kick, without being like too pokey, and that's something we're going to cover here. So the first thing we're going to do with this is we're going to gate it. Now I tried a couple of different gates on this. There's some pretty good ones out there, like you got Blackstone Audio silencer. You can just generally use an expander in like an SSL style channel strip, or even just using like Trigger 2 as a gate. So that's what I went with today. And the gate on Trigger 2 is actually really solid. So we just have it on gate mode over here, the attack at 0.4, the hold at 4 milliseconds, and a release time of 400 milliseconds. You just have to have your mix over this side over on 0%, and that means it's playing the original signal, not a triggered sample. So it's a pretty good gate. It really tightens things up, and just being able to see all the transients in here and set the detail to where it triggers the gate is really helpful. The EQ moves that I'm about to do, they're not always going to translate well to everything else. Obviously, every kick sounds different. Every microphone is going to have a different EQ to it. You have to use your ears and do those EQ moves according to what works well for you. If your kick already sounds great, you may not need that much EQ. Okay, so next up, we've got the Brainworks SSL 4000E channel strip. So we've got a little bit of compression here. So basically all I did here with the compression was pull the threshold up until there's a little bit of gain reduction happening, left the release time kind of medium, and we've got a 5:1 ratio. I just wanted a tiny little bit of compression here at this stage. Just evening the dynamics out just a little bit. Then we're doing a small cut at 6.7K. I'm just pulling out a little bit of that top end, and that becomes a little bit more apparent as we go down through the processing. I think I came back and added this move because some of the other moves that I add later was making the kick a little too bright for my liking. And then we're doing a cut around 234 Hertz. This is just like a bit of a boxy region. Just taking a bit of that like yucky low mid stuff out and just making the kick feel a little bit deeper. And then we have a low shelf boosted from around 112 Hertz. We're just boosting that about 2.6 dB, just to add a little bit of extra thump into the kick. So even though we're gating with Trigger 2, I've kept the expander on here because I find the fade on the expander sounds really natural. So we've still got this dropping to around minus 30 dBs. With a release time of 0.3, so it's a little bit shorter than what Trigger 2 is doing. And then I've just got the threshold set, so it's reacting every time the kick hits. You can hear the tail end is a little bit better. We get a little bit less of what's happening after the kick with the expander on here, so you don't hear as much like snare bleed coming in afterwards. I also have the phase flipped because I thought that sounded better with the overheads and the room mics. Now, next up, we have quite a crazy EQ here. So first things first, we're using Pro Q3, and we've got the linear phase set here because I'm using a high pass filter and a low pass filter. start using filters like that, sometimes it can make things go out of phase when you have like multi mics working together. We do have a kick outside as well, and it's in relationship to the room mics and the overheads. Sometimes when you start adding filters and you don't have it in linear phase, things start to sound out of phase and there's a bit of a shift and you might lose body. So that's why I'm using linear phase. And so what we have here is a high pass filter up to 18 Hertz, just cutting some of that really low frequency stuff. It's not really important in a kick. And then we're doing a boost at 52 Hertz, 2.5 dB. So I'm trying to bring out a little bit of rumble in the kick. And then this one is a pretty important move here. At 196 Hertz, we're cutting around 10 dBs with a fairly narrow Q. To get rid of some of that sort of like low mid boxiness, we cut a little bit of it on the Brainworks, but we're going in a little bit harder here on the Fab Filter to really clean that up and really focus the kick in this lower sort of like below 100 Hertz region, get a little bit more sub and thump going on. So let me show you those 3 moves. So you can hear it really cleans up that low mid stuff. Adds a little bit more thickness, makes the kick sound a bit deeper. Then we have a little notch at 500 Hertz in the kick. This is where you get like kind of just some yucky mid-range that's not really helping the kick out. So we've just got a small cut there, about 3 dBs. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. What I'm trying to do here is balance out the upper high mids, the higher frequencies in the kick, because there's a little bit of like pokiness in my kick sound here. Like between like 2 to 5K, there's this really spiky frequency that I get out of my bass drum in particular. And so what I'm doing here is like pulling that down to try and like level this out. So we're doing a notch at 3.8K, about 7-8 dBs. And then we're doing a little bit of a cut as well at 8K, about 3 dBs. Hear that real presencey sound about it. So I don't really like how much presence there is at around 4 to 3K. Okay, so I've mellowed that out a bit. Then I've done a really big bell boost, which is covering all the way down even to around 500 Hertz, all the way up into our airy frequencies up here at like 20K plus. And that's just bringing everything up now. So we're getting a bit more mid-range, a bit more air, and then we're bringing back everything that we just cut away. So we're gonna get a bit more of an even response out of the higher frequencies. And then lastly, we just have a low pass filter, just cutting off like from above 12K upwards. Just, we don't really need that super high stuff in the kick. Anything kind of above 10K is like, you don't need a lot of it. So we've got a lot more attack on the top end now, but it's a bit more balanced sounding, and we've cleaned up these low mids a little bit. So coming back from where we were, so sounding cool. Now this is where things are gonna get a little bit more interesting. We have Saturn 2 and we're doing a little bit of multi-band saturation here. Mostly we're saturating our high frequencies from around 1.1K upwards. So I've got it on the warm tape mode and I'm really driving this. So all you have to do in Saturn is you can click up the top here and you get the plus symbol and you can add a band. So you can add as many bands as you want, but you know, we're just using 2 bands, a low band and a high band. And the low band, we don't really have much going on in it. It's just on the warm tape mode with 20% drive. The warm tape mode adds a nice thump to the kick. And then over here, we've got warm tape mode as well, but we're driving it to 90% basically. And we have the linear phase mode on again because we have a split in the bands. So again, we can get phase issues when we're using like multi mics. It can create issues. So putting it in linear phase, make sure that the relationship stays intact. Adding a lot of excitement to the kick. So up here, have a listen to what happens as we drive it. So you can really get a nice even response out of those high frequencies by adding some saturation to them. Hypes them up a little bit. And then having that little bit of extra thump on the low end here, it just sounds nice. It just sort of gives us a little bit more rumble, a little bit more clackiness to the kick. And that's just giving me more of that kind of like metal scooped hard rock kind of drum sound. Next up, we got Slate Digital's virtual mix rack. And basically all we have in here is the FG401, which is a VCA style compressor, 5:1 ratio, slow attack, fast release, couple of dBs of gain reduction, and the mix at 70%. So I have the mix pulled back a little bit just so that we don't lose the low end. Generally, when you add a bit of compression to a kick, when it starts clamping down, you'll feel the low end kind of like disappear a little bit. It really clamps down on the bass. So just having the mix pull back a bit just helps us retain that a little bit. So pretty subtle, it's just there to help rein it in a little bit. Then I'm following this up with Black Sword Audio's Clipper. Occasionally you have a kick that gets hit really hard and it's sort of really spiky. This is here to kind of stop that. So you won't really see it working too hard. So it's not really doing anything, but if something does jump forward, it's going to get clamped down on it. So our next two plugins are going to be about just the final tonal shaping of the kick. So I still feel like after all of that, there is still a little bit too much around 4K in the kick that I don't like the sound of. Just this kind of spiky presence that I just want to pull back a little bit. And so I've done a cut around 2.3 dBs at 4K with another instance of Pro Q3. Just to even those high mids out just a little bit better, I find that is working really well for me. And lastly, we've got Baby Audio's Smooth Operator, and I'm using this just to suppress the high frequencies a little bit and get a more even response yet again. So being live drums, you know, if they hit it a little bit harder or a little bit softer, it's gonna get a slightly different response out of the overall EQ of the kick. So with this genre, we want it to be fairly consistent, and I don't want to be hearing like differences in the treble and the sound of the beater. I want it to be fairly consistent. And this is gonna help us rein in those spiky frequencies that are jumping in and out and just sort of smooth the upper mids out and keep it really consistent sounding. It's only gonna be doing a little bit. So check it out, and I'll pull it down so you can see how crazy this thing can get. So that's basically all it's doing. You can see it's really working in this sort of like 2 to 4K area. So this is our kick-in mic. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like with and without any processing. Now we also have a kick-out mic. Now this has way less processing on it, so bear with me. We have, again, a trigger to doing our gating. And then we've got our Brainworks SSL 4000E again, and we're doing a massive bell boost in the low frequencies at 56 Hertz, pushing it all the way 15 dBs, and that's bringing out a more sub frequency. So I'm trying to turn this mic into a bit more of a sub kick mic. So really thumpy. I'm also doing a cut at 587 Hertz. Again, makes it feel deeper. And then we're doing a cut at 3.3K. Just removing some of like the cymbals and like upper mids that we don't really need because we're making this into a sub focus mic. And then you'll see we've got the same settings, 5:1 ratio, medium release, and just a tiny bit of gain reduction going on down here. So a massive transformation. We also have the phase reverse as well. So that means it's going to stay in phase with our kick-in mic. And that's it. And then that's just blended in. So we only need a little bit of that, but it does help make it sound a bit thicker. Let's have a listen to that in the context of the mix now. So we've made it a lot clearer, a lot bigger and deeper sounding. Now the other thing that you can do to enhance this even further, because this is a pretty good natural sounding kick sound, we've done a bit of processing, but it's still a natural kick sound. We can blend in a kick sample to get a more even response out of the kick sound overall. So let me show you what we've got here. I've got trigger 2 and I'm using one of my samples here. This is called Clickety Clack. So this is a sample from the Spinlight Trigger 2 Volume 1 sample pack. It is a multi-velocity kick sound and it's actually the same bass drum. So I made this sample using my Ludwig kit, and this is the same kit that we tracked these drums on this week. So, you know, solid kick sound. We get a little bit of room and reverb out of this as well, which is good for adding a little bit of extra space to the kick sound. We can always add reverb, but I just love to use room sample sounds over that stuff. It sounds more organic to me. Now, what I've got happening after this is just a channel EQ, and I'm doing a wide bell boost at 4.6K. So bringing out the click of the kick a little bit more in the upper mid. So have a listen to what this sounds like. Okay, so you can see we've got the kick sample a little bit lower than the actual mic sound. And have a listen to what it sounds like as we take each of these out, how they are working together to make the kick sound better. So when they're combined, I think they sound really great together. The sample fills out the mic sound just a little bit nicer, like some of that sort of like trebly stuff that we don't have in that mic. It's just not there. But in the sample, we can reinforce it and fill it out a little bit more. I think that just adds a better, even response to the kick sound so that when we hear it in the mix, it just sits a little bit better than when it's on its own. Like even when I turn the kick mic up, it's missing just a little bit of extra excitement. It's missing just a bit more detail. And the same if we just have the sample. While it sounds cool, we're just missing a little bit of the humanness, the sort of like the natural organicness that we've got from the microphone. So having that blend of both, I think just makes the kick sound really good. So it just reinforces that kick sound really nicely. It doesn't sound like it's changed dramatically, but it's changed enough that we can hear the kick better through a big wall of guitars. So no processing. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment down below. Let me know if you want to see a full mix breakdown of this entire drum mix here. I will go through every plugin, everything that I've done here in full detail. If enough people are interested, we can break this thing apart and have a look at it. And if you guys want to support this channel, make sure you head over to my website. There's a link in the description below. Go check out my range of drum samples and mixing courses. Grabbing that stuff is a massive support for the time that goes into making videos like this. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you want to check out my Trigger 2 sample pack, then check out this next video coming up.